Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Hello and welcome again to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville government, politics, news, education, business, really whatever gets our attention. My name is Jesse Mayshark. I am co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, which you can find at CompassKnox.com. Joined, as always, by Scott Barker, also co-publisher and co-founder of Compass. How are you doing today, Scott?
Jesse, I've got a confession to make.
Uh-oh. Wait, are we on the right podcast?
We are, because I have made it a point, I've said it on the podcast numerous times, that I always vote on Election Day because I just love the idea of having the one day almost like a holiday.
That's true. That's the difference between us. I vote early. You vote on Election Day. This is known.
I voted early last
Whoa.
week. Yeah, went ahead and voted.
What prompted that?
Fear of standing in line even longer on Election Day.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, tell us about the experience of voting early for you. I'm really excited.
I'm an old guy
about
with a bad back. I don't like standing in line anymore. Oh well, I mean, it was the exact reason I don't like to vote early, because it felt like an errand. You know, went there, and then I stopped by the grocery store afterwards.
Did it lack some gravitas from your perspective?
But I voted, and so that's good.
So I want to know, in comparison to your normal Election Day voting, was your early voting the same, more or less time spent waiting in line and stuff like that?
Yeah, there was a little more time, but the precinct I voted on Election Day is pretty small,
mm-hmm.
and you rarely have to wait very much. And although I think if this election there would be lines, and so
you went ahead and did it.
Went ahead and did it. Yeah, it's the first time. I was thinking it's the first time since the 2020 during the pandemic.
Well, as advocates of early voting always say, this means your vote is now recorded.
Right.
Should something, horrible happen to you, which of course we hope it doesn't, but, if Alabama loses another game and you sink into a depression that makes it impossible for you to drag yourself out of the house, you've already got your vote registered.
It's in. Right. It's in. Roll Tide.
All right. Well, we are going to be talking a lot about elections and voting this week. Also, a really interesting discussion, series of discussions really at County Commission that shed some light on the new political calculus of that body. We'll talk about that. And we will also touch on the City of Knoxville's Vision Zero program, which has nothing to do with being blindfolded or losing your eyesight or anything like that. But we will tell you what it is about. But yes, to start off, there's a fair amount of election-related news this week. Not surprisingly, we are in the middle of early voting in an election that everybody thinks is one of the most important of our times, apparently. Whatever side you are on, everybody is putting an awful lot of emphasis on the outcome of this election. Talking, of course, about the presidential race, but we are mostly not going to be talking about the presidential race here because you have many thousands of other people who want to talk to you about that out there in the podcast landscape. We're going to contain most of our discussion to a couple of local issues. But before we turn to those issues in particular, Scott, let's take a look at the early voting landscape to date. And helpfully, this past Thursday was the halfway point in our early voting cycle. And Election Commissioner Chris Davis provided us with some interesting breakdowns of the demographics and numbers that we've seen so far. So what are we seeing?
Actually, the midpoint was actually Wednesday.
Well, right. He reported on Thursday
they
from the midpoint Wednesday.
There's a one-day lag in
That's
their
right.
their reporting, which is, and you can't.
Well, the votes have to be in before they count them. Is my understanding of how that works.
And when we say count them, they're just counting ballots, not.
Right. They have not yet
not counting votes.
They haven't looked at anybody's vote yet. That none of that happens until Election Day.
As of Wednesday, the 80,845 people had voted early in person in Knox County, and that's way up over 2020, which is the last presidential election. Where at that point, 65,723 had voted. And so it's way up. The absentee ballots are down, but that's all because of COVID.
Right. In 2020, there were a lot more absentee ballots than there are this year.
Yeah, and arguably fewer in-person votes.
But our total number between the two is still
higher.
Up. Yeah,
it's still up. Which is good because our turnout is typically abysmal. So for whatever reason, if it's the, for many, it'll be the presidential election. I'm sure a lot of Democrats are getting out because they've got a local Democrat running for U.S. Senate, Lori Johnson. So, but anyway, that's, and that was as of Wednesday. We record this on Friday morning. And actually it's a little bit early afternoon this week, but election administrator Chris Davis sent out an email earlier today saying, we're over 100,000.
Counting Thursday's votes.
Mm-hmm. and this morning's votes in Knox County.
And that's out of a total registered voter base of how many?
Well, we have 336,000 registered voters. Not all of them are active. We've got about 318,000 active voters. And inactive doesn't mean you can't vote. Inactive means they don't know in the Election Commission office if you still live.
Because you haven't voted in X number of cycles.
You haven't voted, and you haven't responded to, when they send you a postcard, or anything, you haven't responded to that.
But they don't take you off the rolls, right?
They do not take you off the rolls. Inactivity is not a reason to purge someone from the rolls. So what they do is they just leave you on there, and if it's a Rumpelstiltskin kind of thing or whatever, you go back in, you haven't voted in 5 elections, and you want to go in and vote, you just go in, got your proof of got your ID and everything and all the proof that they need, and you can go resume your voting. So. Anyway, but already, with early voting already, about a third of the registered voters have voted. We've got a few more days of early voting to go. So, by the time people are listening to this, there'll be 4 more days.
Right.
It ends on Thursday, October 31st.
Easy to remember. It ends on Halloween this year. Do you want a trick or a treat?
And for Alabama fans like me, it's Nick Saban's birthday. just saying. Anyway, since you brought up Alabama, I'm going to have to do it. But one of the things is, this is like most elections around here, the people who are age 55 or older make up the majority of the people who voted so far.
But it's about a 2/3 majority, which is actually a somewhat smaller majority than we saw like in the county general election in August. I think that number was even higher, like up over 3/4.
Yeah, the kind of not golden years, because that's your old age, but the people who are in their really productive years, the 30 to 55 people are up. So compared to the county primary, so women are voting much higher rate than men. Had about 39,000 women, almost 40,000 women, about 31,000 men. Although, caveat, there are a bunch of people, about 15,000. They don't know what the gender is. That's because you use the federal form, voter registration form. It does not ask you what your gender is. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of people, they don't know, but it appears that that women are voting in greater numbers than men. Don't know if that's an abortion rights thing. Don't know what it is, but
well, and we also just have more registered women voters in the county than male voters overall, right?
Yeah, and there are about 15,000 more women registered to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
of the ones
we know, and in the distribution of the voting, the election commission released kind of the number of votes by state house district. It's running pretty much the way it always does. A lot higher in the more Republican areas. There are areas that tend to vote more Republican, like the 14th district, which is Southwest Knox County. The more people voted in there. And we've got to remember, these districts, when they redraw them every 10 years, have about the same number of actual people in them. So
not necessarily the same number of voters, because that will vary a bit depending on the age of people, but approximately the same population in each district.
But they about 16,616 people in Southwest Knox County in the 14th district had voted as of Wednesday. If you want to compare that, the 15th district, which is East Knoxville and South Knoxville, only about 6,268 had voted. Mm-hmm. There's a big disparity.
And that's the 15th is the most Democratic-leaning district of our state House districts. And, like you say, this is a common pattern, and I think it's not so much that people in Republican areas vote more than people in Democratic areas. These are different socioeconomics, and it is true across the country that more we already talked about older people voting at a higher level. And for one thing, City of Knoxville, city limits population is a bit younger than the population outside the city. But so older people vote more affluent people vote more, people with college degrees vote more, and so forth. You see all of those more represented in the more affluent suburban areas, and so it's not a surprise. And of course, that includes the Democrats who live in those areas are probably more likely to vote than the Democrats who live in urban areas. And so, and one thing that's hurt, like one thing is and we'll be talking about it a little bit. The 15th district really isn't going to be that competitive, right?
And the other Democratic district, District 90, has Gloria Johnson running unopposed,
right?
And only 8,100 people have voted in there as of Wednesday. So, but one thing that I was really interested in looking at was the 18th district, because that's the arguably the only House district that is that's going to be close, but it could be close.
Perceived as the most competitive local race on the ballot.
And Elaine Davis is the incumbent Republican. She's running against Brian Goldberg. Goldberg has all kinds of. He's got Republicans who are endorsing him as well. It looks close, so you're kind of thinking, okay, turnout might be, a lot higher there. Well, I mean, it's higher than it was 4 years ago, but it's about where, it's the fourth busiest district so far.
Right.
Which
so
is
it's
usually,
not obvious that race by itself is driving a lot.
Which is kind of where it always is. It's
Yeah.
either third or fourth around in there.
Well, I think this is what we see in presidential races. In presidential races, people are coming out to vote for president. And I think local races, being competitive or not, might have some influence. But anybody who's interested enough to be following their local races is definitely going to vote for in the presidential race. And then there's going to be a bunch of other people who are mostly driven there by the presidential race, and they'll go ahead and vote for whatever else is on the ballot. But the presidential race is the thing that's driving everybody, basically.
Oh, yeah. Even though Tennessee's not a battleground state, people still want to go out and
want to make
vote.
their voices heard.
That's right, and that's good. And one of the interesting things too, and we've talked about this, is the city charter referendums, and especially referendum 2, which would establish a new voting system.
Would create an all at-large city council.
Right, and so turnout in the city's been fairly heavy. About 125,000 people as of Wednesday. What's interesting about that is
not in the city.
Yes,
125,000.
I'm sorry, 25,000.
Yeah. Okay.
But the thing is, that's as many people as have voted in, and especially now, since we've got a few days on this report, more people have voted early in this election than voted in the last truly competitive mayoral race in 2019, when India Kincannon faced off with Eddie Manis. So it was,
and that was in the total election.
And that was in the total election.
Right. We've already had more city voters,
right? And the biggest turnout for a city election this century was 2003, when Madeline Rogero ran against Bill Haslam. It was about 30,000. That'll easily be eclipsed as well. So,
well, and the same is true at the county level. In 2022, when Mayor Glenn Jacobs ran for re-election, there were a total of just over 55,000 votes countywide, and we're already, as you say, we're over 100,000 countywide votes today. We're going to more than double that probably just during early voting. So all of that just gets back to, like, these races, the presidential races. This is what people who mostly don't pay much attention to politics, but can get motivated to vote once every 4 years. This is when they do it. And
one thing that this does is you're going to have probably a hefty majority of city voters in this election who don't vote in city elections, who aren't engaged with city government to a meaningful extent, who will decide the election system that they don't participate in.
Right.
So I mean, that's it's kind of odd. You assume that they're going to vote. I mean, most people, I think, when they go in, even if they don't know much about what else is going on below president, will go ahead and vote for they're there. They might as well vote for the stuff. And if they get down there, and who knows how they're going to vote? They might. I've talked to several people. First of all, you've got to flip the ballot over to get to that amendment question. If they do that, and they show them that when you go in to vote, but you flip it over. There are two schools of thought. One is people just vote yes for whatever's on there. The other one would be that people distrust the government, and whatever the government wants them to do, they don't want to do, so they'll vote no. So I don't know.
But yeah, no, that is a good point, that ultimately the decision about what kind of city council elections we're going to have going forward will be made by a lot of people who will then proceed to not vote in those city council elections, whatever form they take, because they don't vote in city council elections.
Right. Again, city elections, as everybody should know, are in odd-numbered years, so they never fall on, when there's a presidential race or a gubernatorial race.
You have to be looking for them to find
them. The only reason that this city charter amendment is on the ballot in this election is that's what the charter calls for.
Right.
Calls for it to be an even numbered year. So, so that's the people are voting. That's the one thing that the big takeaway here is voting in greater numbers than they have in recent elections. Period.
And where people are voting is pretty consistent with what we normally see.
Yeah.
Heaviest turnouts in Farragut and downtown West, lower turnouts at the City County building downtown, in Gibbs and in East Knoxville.
And South Knoxville. South
Knoxville, yeah, South Knox County. And that distribute, which people, you can vote at any early voting location. It doesn't have to be the one closest to where you live. So some people, might just vote while they happen to be out in another part of the county. But I think we see that same divide reflected in the district turnouts that you were talking about.
Right.
Much heavier turnout in the western parts of the county. Pretty good turnout in sort of the northern suburban parts of the county as well. And then much lower within the city limits.
Yep.
I wanted to touch on, you mentioned Brian Goldberg in District 18 getting some Republican endorsements. You also mentioned Eddie Manis in regard to his run for mayor in 2019. So just to kind of complete that circle, Eddie Manis is one of the Republicans who came out this week and endorsed Brian Goldberg in his run against Elaine Davis, as did former city council member Janet Testerman, also a Republican. Both of them have their own histories with the 18th District and with Davis in particular. Manis actually represented the 18th District from 2020 to 2022 before the district was redrawn, and he opted not to run for re-election. But when he ran in 2020, many county Republicans, or sort of a cadre of more conservative county Republicans, including Davis, challenged his legitimacy as a Republican and argued that he shouldn't be allowed on the ballot as a Republican. He was ultimately. And then Testerman ran for that seat in 2022, and she faced off against Davis in the primary, and Davis likewise accused Testerman of not being a real Republican, not being a real conservative. And so, kind of given those histories, it may not be exactly surprising on either a personal or philosophical basis that Manis and Testerman are endorsing Goldberg. They are clearly not fans of Elaine Davis, and she is clearly not a fan of theirs. But still, it shows something. It indicates that Goldberg has the chance to win over some Republican voters, particularly in the kind of West Knoxville areas of that district where both Manis and Testerman were from. I still think he's going to see some real challenges in the South Knoxville portions of the district, which are much more heavily Republican.
Yeah, and a lot of that area of West Knoxville is kind of the last bastion of the old-fashioned establishment Republican.
Right.
In fact, one of the donors to Goldberg's campaign was former Mayor Victor Ash's wife.
Yeah.
Joan. And
Mayor Ash always makes the point that his wife makes her own decisions, which is no doubt true, as is true for all of us who have spouses. They make their own decisions. At the same time, we do note when certain significant people's spouses, when a household with somebody significant in it makes that kind of contribution.
Well, and the former mayor doesn't generally contribute to local campaigns, although as anyone who's involved in politics knows, he gives advice to anyone and everyone who's running.
There's a difference between not donating and not being involved in one way or another.
Yes. He anyway is that's just, I think, an indication that it's not just people who are disgruntled because they lost to her. I think that it goes beyond that to the more establishment Republican types. The type of person that Elaine Davis would call a rhino.
Right.
So.
Exactly. And then did also want to talk a little bit about District 15. You mentioned, because you wrote about that this week, kind of taking a look at the two candidates there. That is the most Democratic district in the county of our state legislative districts, currently held by State Representative Sam McKenzie, facing Republican Justin Hurst. What have you got to tell us about that?
Well, McKenzie's won a couple of times in that district. It's where he grew up. He went to Austin East High School. His brothers were went on to play football at the University of Tennessee and then the NFL. Are very, very well known. When he went to Fisk University and came back to Knoxville. Has been very active in the community. He's been a baseball coach and all kinds of stuff. Worked at ORNL. Was very active in the community, and then after Black Wednesday, he ran for county commission and won. Served 2 terms on county commission. So he's a well-known, widely I think liked person in the district, and tough for anybody. And he's a Democrat, so it'd be tough for any Republican to win. The candidate who's running against him, Justin Hurst, is kind of an interesting character. He'd never run for office before this year, and this is the second office he's run for. Yeah. He ran for county commission, lost in the primary
in March, and then immediately turned around and filed for the legislature the next month.
Yeah, and so he's an interesting guy. He basically said if it's not a long shot deal, he doesn't want anything to do with it. So this is certainly a long shot deal.
That said, he's not running much of what you'd call a campaign.
No, he's not. He's not raising any money. He's not spending any money. He's not real. He doesn't have a website. He doesn't. There aren't any yard signs. I mean, he'll go out and talk to people, and he agreed to an interview with me.
He has shown up at voter forums. I'll say that.
There you go, and he's doing that. But yeah, it's not the kind of campaign that would win. Even if he wasn't running against a Democratic incumbent in the most Democratic district in the county. So
right,
and McKenzie is one of the things that he's got going for him is he's been there. He's been in the legislature long enough to where he's got a leadership position in the House. He's the Black Caucus chair. And so his what clout a Democrat can have in Nashville now, he's got. So of course that's not much because it's the Republican supermajority.
Yeah, he notes that he is one of only 3 Democratic state reps in all of East Tennessee, with one of the others being Gloria Johnson, and then a third one in Chattanooga, and that's basically it as far as Democrats east of the Cumberland Plateau.
Yeah, and one of the things he's been doing is he's been actually campaigning for other Democratic candidates in the state. A lot of them in Middle Tennessee, where they have either might be at risk of losing a seat or a possibility of flipping a seat. And one of the things that he is insistent upon is that the Democrats don't have to have a majority to change the dynamics in Nashville. All they need to do is flip a few seats. So he's out there helping them. He's done a little bit in East Tennessee as well, but the Sevier County Democratic Party will not. They're not going to win very many races down there. So
yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, anything else that we need to mention about the elections before we move on to a couple of other issues?
I think we're good to go. The Amendment 2 folks are for and against her.
They're out there for-ing and against.
They're for and against, and yeah, it's really shaping up to be quite the contentious issue. So,
but again, the people who are engaged in that discussion may well be outnumbered at the ballot box by people who are just going to show up, and the first time that they hear about those amendments is going to be when they read them on their ballot.
Right. You talk about you being confused. Oh boy.
So if you are a listener to this podcast, if you are a Compass subscriber and you are well educated on Amendment 2, which you should be if you've been reading our coverage and listening to our coverage, you can take it upon yourself to try to share that knowledge with maybe less informed voters in your circle.
That's right. Our election coverage is not behind the paywall. You can you can go take a story, share it with anybody you want, as many people as you want.
That's right. And you can find all of that at CompassKnox.com. All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about this interesting, albeit quite prolonged, Knox County Commission zoning meeting on Monday. And if the prospect of a 5.5-hour Knox County Commission zoning meeting does not fill you with joy or the sense that, boy, that sounds exciting, I would love to tell you that you're wrong, but I cannot. It was 5.5 hours of people talking about land use. But it was very interesting, if not in the moment, at least sort of in total of what actually happened there. And we talked about this a little bit in previous weeks. County Commissioner Andy Fox, who represents the 9th District in South Knox County, is one of the 5 county commissioners who was just sworn in at the beginning of September. So he's only been on commission for under 2 months at this point. And and we've talked about Fox before. He is a very outspoken, ideological, conservative, Christian attorney, activist, basically. And when I say attorney activist or activist attorney, what I mean is that over the years, he has been extremely active in filing politically motivated lawsuits against pretty much any level of government you can name. Some of those have been over gun rights, which is a particular issue of advocacy for him. He also filed a good number of lawsuits over COVID mandates that were filed against both the county and the state. He is bringing that sort of freewheeling combativeness to county commission. And I just want to say that this is exactly what we predicted when we talked about this. I remember when he was running saying that county commission has never had a figure quite like Fox, and it'll be interesting to see what he does. And yes, it is interesting to see what he does. So among the first things he's come out of the box swinging at is he ran on a platform of being very suspicious of new development in South Knox County, particularly development that brings any kind of density into the more suburban and rural areas. And there have been a handful of controversial rezonings that have been done in recent years, and including several in the last 6 months, down in South Knox County that would allow new large-scale developments at higher density than the areas have typically had. The biggest of those is the Thunder Mountain development, which we have talked about here, which is down almost all the way south to the county line, kind of between Chapman Highway and Sevierville Pike in the Dry Hollow community, has engendered a tremendous amount of community opposition over the past couple of years. And then there was another controversial rezoning a few months ago on Tipton Station Road that's going to allow a fairly dense development there. Fox opposed all of those while he was running for office, but he wasn't on commission yet, so he wasn't on commission when they came for a vote. And so he essentially was looking for a do-over. He put 5 proposals on this zoning agenda last Monday to reverse these 5 rezonings, or in one case it was a plan amendment that had been done to allow this denser development, which is something that basically County Commission just doesn't do. County Commission does not, they will spend a long time debating whether or not to approve a certain rezoning or what conditions to put on it. But once they approve something, it's assumed that it's approved and the property owner can go off and they know what they are allowed to do now. It is essentially unprecedented for a property owner to come in, request a rezoning, get granted, go off and start working on their project, and then have commission turn around and say, whoa, hold on a second. We might want to, what it's called downzoning, when you rezone property in a way that makes it more restrictive in terms of what you can build. So that's what Fox was moving to do here. And it is true that County Commission has the legal authority to rezone property just kind of on its own. They have to send it through Planning Commission like a normal application. Usually these applications for rezoning come from a property owner. Somebody owns a property, they want to do something with it that they need new zoning for, they come and apply to Planning Commission, goes through Planning Commission. If it gets approved, it goes to County Commission. But County Commission can also just say, hey, we want to rezone this piece of property, even though the county doesn't own it. It's privately owned property. But the county can send that to Planning Commission for their review and vote, and then have it come back to County Commission. So that's what Fox was trying to do. If any of these had passed the zoning meeting, which, I'll go ahead and say they didn't, they would have gone to Planning Commission, then they would have come back to County Commission. But the argument here, it partly did turn on this question of how much density does Commission want to allow in some of the more rural and suburban parts of the county. But it also came down to some basic ideas about property rights. And so Fox lost all of these votes on either 8-3 or 7-3 votes because County Commissioner Shane Jackson, in the midst of the meeting, got the news that his mother had died, and so he had to leave. And just want to send out condolences to Commissioner Jackson for that. But so basically Fox got support from Commissioners Angela Russell and Rhonda Lee. And it's pretty clear that the 3 of them, and this was kind of anticipated, are going to be a little bit of a voting block on this new commission. All 3 of them were assisted in their election efforts by conservative campaign consultant Eric Wyatter, and they all were elected as quote-unquote constitutional conservatives, kind of indicating a fairly aggressive form of Trumpier, I guess you could say, Republican politics. And so they were all ready to just kind of go at this and say, yes, we don't like this new density, let's rezone it. But the rest of Commission was not. That wasn't so surprising because that would have been a pretty dramatic move for Commission to do. What was in some ways more interesting were some items they talked about elsewhere on that agenda. There were a few other items in South Knox County that were coming to County Commission for the first time for a rezoning vote. And Fox opposed those too. And I think this is one thing that we can expect to see. Any new development in South Knox County that has more than 2 dwelling units per acre, Commissioner Fox is going to be opposed to. And so he did try to oppose a plan amendment that would have allowed a new fairly dense development right on John Sevier Highway. And he lost that one too, but he lost it on a 6-5 vote, not an 8-3 vote, because Commission Vice Chair Kim Frazier, who is a persistent critic of development, she's somebody who got elected to Commission kind of arguing that County Commission has done a bad job of ensuring that local communities and infrastructure can handle new growth. And Adam Thompson from the 8th District in East Knox County, who also came on to Commission with some of those same concerns. They were not willing to go along with Fox's efforts to rezone or unrezone the other properties. But when it came to voting on this, this first look property where they were considering it for the first time, they joined in. And so, Scott, I think what that basically means is that we have a county commission now that it looks like there are still 6 votes that you could probably call quote unquote pro-growth or more friendly to development. But now there's almost an equal number on the other side that's going to be pretty skeptical of development, and I think this is going to change a little bit how developers have to interact with county commission when they are coming to them.
Yeah, because in the recent past they haven't had to worry too much.
Yeah.
Especially once it gets through planning commission.
They might get a couple tough questions, but they will get conditions imposed on them. Like, you can have this rezoning if you help us fix the visibility on the highway or whatever.
Right. And but a lot of that gets hashed out in planning commission, and you've got a county commission that has been so pro-growth, and that I don't see that really changing, but it might be with a lot more discussion, a lot more of justification of why you're doing that. I mean, one of the things is, you go to planning commission, or you get at the county commission zoning meetings or whatever. You always know what the objections are going to be to these developments. It's going to be the infrastructure is not good enough. The roads are too narrow. They're too curvy. They're too.
And it's going to affect water quality.
It's going to affect water quality. It's going to overcrowd our schools. That's what you're going to hear. Now, whether that's true or not doesn't matter. That's what you're going to hear, and it probably is true in just about every instance. I mean, you look out there, but the planning commission and county commission too. People are moving here. They have to live somewhere, and so despite the impact on school crowding, despite the adding more cars to narrow winding roads, despite adding more density in more rural areas, they're probably going to go ahead and approve them. But now it's going to be a fight. Now they're going to have to fight to do it.
Yeah, and developers may be subject to even more kinds of conditions, because some of those 6 who voted in favor of this one, they are also commissioners who in the past have expressed reservations about certain kinds of projects. And one thing that this does, I think, is like, if you look at who those 6 are, it's the 3 Democrats on commission. There's only 3 out of 11, but all 3 of them were on that side of voting to allow this development on John Sevier Highway. And then 3 Republicans who are, I think you could say the more kind of pro-growth or friendly to growth Republicans, which is Commission Chair Gina Oster, Commissioner Terry Hill, and at-large Commissioner Larson J. And so, for one thing, this is empowering Democrats in a new way. I mean, Democrats just went from having just 2 members to now they have 3, with Jackson having won his race this year. And those 3 Democrats now are going to be very important, probably, to passing almost any, new development or new kind of land use. And any one of those 6, like, if we're going to have a lot of 6-5 votes, any one of those 6 becomes pretty powerful in terms of saying, well, I'll support this, but I want this, or I want this, or I want this. And so that's just going to raise the complexity level for developers who are going to have, which, is not necessarily a bad thing, that, developers who are used to just kind of getting things approved all the time are going to have to think about, how do I make all of these different people happy, and how do I stitch together those votes that I'm going to need? It's also interesting on the opposition side, because those 5 votes, those are really kind of 2 different factions too. I think with Fox and Lee and Russell, you do have concerns about crowding and infrastructure, but you also have concerns that are really more ideological and cultural. And Fox has been pretty explicit about saying that the biggest reason he is opposed to new density in South Knox County is that he has looked at analysis that shows that if density exceeds a certain number of people per square mile, voters turn more liberal. They start electing Democrats. And so he has been pretty straightforward about saying he's trying to stop South Knox County from turning more liberal. And the best way he knows how to do it is just to keep people out of it, keep people from moving there. Now, Frazier, who comes from the Knox Community Planning Alliance, and Adam Thompson, who also comes from that perspective. Their concerns, as they've expressed them, have always been much more kind of pragmatic, not ideological, having to do with the impact on infrastructure, the environment, agriculture, those kinds of issues. They are not necessarily coming at this from a point of view of trying to maintain some sort of ideological purity in any particular part of the county. It's more about balancing resources and making sure that it can be accommodated. Nevertheless, they will probably find common cause on some of these controversial issues. So you kind of have those four factions. You've got the Fox group. You've got, as I will call them, you've got the you have the Planning Alliance kind of group. You have the Democrats, and then you have kind of the pro-growth Republicans. And how all of those, it might depend on the issue and the project, how they all break. But it's a new look for County Commission. It'll be interesting to watch as it continues to play out. All right. The other thing we wanted to hit on this week was on Thursday, City Council had a work session to talk about the city's Vision Zero program and give some updates on that. And Scott, tell us what Vision Zero is.
Vision Zero is an initiative that the Kincaid administration launched with a goal of eliminating traffic-related deaths on city streets by 2040. It's a pretty ambitious goal because people get killed driving all the time, with a particular interest or emphasis on pedestrians and bicyclists, and taking a variety of measures. Improving streets with bike lanes and sidewalks and things like that, and trying to make it safer to be able to ride a bike on city streets. The part of it's enforcement, part of it's going to be education. They kind of taking an all of the above approach to reducing those, and really, I mean, one of the things they had this workshop, one of the things they pointed out is, there were 36 fatalities on Knoxville streets in vehicular wrecks last year. There were only 24 homicides. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's 50% more people died of, just in a crash than were killed in a murder, or basically shot and killed. Cody Gentry, who's heading up that effort for the city, thinks that zero fatalities by 2040 is doable. We'll see. It seems like a pretty ambitious thing because there's so many variables involved. Alcohol's one. I mean, one of the people aren't going to just suddenly stop drinking and driving because you've got a catchy phrase about a program there. So, but one of the big initiatives is going after federal funding and other funding to improve roadways and infrastructure, make them more pedestrian friendly. Just a couple of weeks ago, the city accepted a $17.8 million grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation to make major improvements to a section of Chapman Highway from the Henley Bridge to Fort Dickerson Park, essentially, where they're going to have a protected bicycle lane and pedestrian path, off from the edge of the road where you're not, if you're riding your bike, your handlebar's not going to, hit somebody's side view mirror. So it's that kind of thing. But that's really expensive. I mean, we're talking about, the whole project is about $23 million, and it's just for a very short distance there. So these projects are very expensive. But the goal there is to make it safer for you to walk or bike along a very dangerous stretch of Chapman Highway. I mean, it's traffic's really heavy right through there. People will, for some reason, try to cross Chapman Highway on foot right through there. So it's something that I think people would, who drive Chapman Highway would like it anyway once they got it in. But it is really one of those things where they're really counting on kind of using infrastructure as a as protection, as a safety measure.
Right. Well, more power to them, I guess. What is the next thing that we actually see out of all of this?
Well, one of the things you're going to see is when you're going to start seeing that work on Chapman Highway, and you've seen other things around on Broadway at Fifth Avenue. There are these, and I can't remember what they're called. They're white stumps that come up out of the. I can't. They've got a really cool name, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But they've got those to kind of keep. If you're in your car, you drift over into the bike lane, you'll hit those, and kind of like the rough.
I just call them bumps.
Bumps on the side of the road there, where when you drift off on the interstate. But they've got those out. There are cities put in a lot of bicycle paths. They've improved a lot of pedestrian intersections. They've done, there's been a lot of stuff done. It's just now they've got now they're pulling them together in kind of one initiative, and
it's got branding. It has a logo.
Yes, it is. It's branding. Instead of just saying, "Oh, we're just going to improve Chapman Highway," they're saying, "Oh, this is Vision Zero." So,
right.
Just there was motorcycle death just the other day. It's just not. They've got it's a lot of hard work. There's a lot to do to get to that zero.
Sure. Well, and I mean, I guess obviously eliminating fatalities is the goal, but the real goal is creating greater safety for all of the people who maybe use these corridors at different times, who don't get hit by cars, but are still operating in a fairly unsafe and insecure environment that doesn't make them feel good.
No, living in fear is no fun. So, right. And driving in fear isn't either.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for this week. Let's look ahead to the coming week. We do have a few things happening. County Commission will have its regular voting meeting, monthly meeting, Monday at 5 o'clock in the main assembly room of the City County building. I think this is one of those months where last week's zoning meeting was kind of where all the action was. There's not a whole lot on this agenda. They are going to appoint a new member of the Knox County Merit System Board of Directors, and a new member of the Knox County Ethics Committee, and a handful of other items, but nothing that jumped out during their agenda review session this past week. So that will probably not be a super newsy meeting, but then commissioners had better hope that they are not there late Monday night, because they are turning around Tuesday morning and having breakfast at 8 a.m. in the Visit Knoxville conference room with the local state delegation to kind of talk about issues coming up in the legislature, or issues that County Commission hopes will come up in the legislature this year, things that they're going to be asking their legislators to maybe try to do on their behalf. That is a pretty small conference room, but that meeting is open to the public. So if you want to come, I would advise getting there a little bit early. 8 a.m. is already pretty early for me, but I will try to be there in time to get a seat. And then, Scott, later on that day, Tuesday, City Council is meeting.
City Council's meeting, and like their counterparts in the county, a very light agenda. they're got $1 million renovation of Cecil Webb Rec Center in South Knoxville is kind of the big ticket thing on there. There's some neighborhood kind of beautification grants that they're giving out to, I believe it's 20 neighborhoods in the city. There's just not no major new initiatives, no new ordinances to for them to consider. So it's a lot weak, and I guess they're kind of resting up for the election the next week. So
right. And speaking of the election, then early voting does end on Thursday, the 31st. That is the last day to cast a ballot before Election Day. So if you don't get in before then, you will have to go and wait in those November 5th lines that Scott is trying to avoid. And Thursday is also, of course, Halloween. So hope you enjoy that in whatever manner you choose to celebrate it.
Hollerbu is we got to.
Well, it's yesterday for everybody listening.
That's right. Yeah. I forgot. Yeah,
that's right.
It was great. It was fantastic. If you weren't there, you missed out on a fantastic time.
Yes, Hollerbu, our producer Seth Barber is one of the organizers of Hollerbu and Happy Holler, which is happening this weekend, this Saturday. So yes, it's tomorrow from the perspective of those of us recording this on Friday, but it is last Saturday from the perspective of those of you listening to it. So if you missed it, I guess, Seth, they can look forward to the next one, right?
Yeah, we got we'll be doing it again next year. I'm working on 3. We'll do a spring, summer, and a fall event next year.
So you got Hollerbu, and
I'm still working on the naming of the summer one. The summer one is going to be fun. It's going to be water related. We're going to get wet and crazy. I've just got to work out some details on the parts and pieces of it. So a good break to get cool in the nice hot July down in Happy Holler.
All right. How about Holler Cool?
All right, there we go. You got it. You heard it here first, people.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this week. Thanks, as always, to Seth Barber for his production work here with Barbarian Productions. Our theme music is by Will Wright. And we will be back to talk to you next week about anything that happens between now and then. And, of course, next week when we record, we are all going to be getting ready for whatever happens on November 5th and going forward. So I know there's a lot of people out there from various parties and perspectives and whatever who are experiencing election stress, anxiety, overload, burnout, just really tired of it and really want it all to be over.
Sounds like a confession more than a statement of the populace.
I'm just saying. There are people out there who feel that way. But we will be back next week to talk to you some more. Take care.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.